Hey Garth, how's it going?
Jason, so good, man. So good. It's good to see you as always. Good to see you as
And
always.
you're in a different location. For people who are watching, it looks like you're in an Adobe hut or something. Where are you and what's going on?
I'm down in Mexico. I'm on March break. You still have another week, I think, but I'm on March break. So yeah, my wife and I traveled down to Playa del Carmen, which you are familiar with, Jason.
Happens to be where Sarah and I got married. So you were very close to.
Heyo.
Now, before we get started here, Garth,
Yeah,
you're on spring break, and I am
yeah.
jealous. That's our current status. Um, can you tell our Can you tell our listeners about maybe a memorable spring break trip that you took either on your own or with students? What comes to mind first?
Well, recency effect. I just got back from Japan. I
Right, of
traveled with
course.
students, grades 9 to 12, and three other incredible trip leaders, Stacy, Joyce, and Aman. And we went to Tokyo, and then Kyoto, and then Hiroshima, and then back to Tokyo and flew out. We were there for almost 10 days, and
What a trip!
yeah, it was exceptional. I'd never been. I had wanted to go for a long, long time, so things conspired that allowed me to join this trip. Um, and it was incredible for a whole bunch of different reasons. The students were amazing. Japan is like another world. The World Baseball Classic was on in Japan while I was
Cool,
there, so
very
that
cool.
was a vibe. Very, very cool. But Jason, the thing that made this trip stand out the most, and I'm just going to talk about my colleagues that I went on the trip here. We laughed so
Right.
much every single day. Uh,
Yeah.
there weren't any like big challenges. Like jet lag was really tough, but we were traveling a lot. We would be out of the hotel by 8 o'clock in the morning. We return at 9:30 at night. But the whole time, laughing, laughing, laughing. And
Right.
my reflection was on our last day, the four of us had lunch together, as we had done every single day beforehand. And I said to them, I said, it's a special thing when four adults who don't it's not like we all work together in the same department or anything along those lines, but it's a special thing when four adults can get together for every single meal and just laugh and learn more about each other. Jason, it was truly a
Oh,
joyful
that's
experience.
an absolute perfect entry to today's podcast. We're
Yeah,
wrapping up
yeah.
our 3 episode series on Rich Sheridan's The Chief Joy Officer and Joy Inc. author. And we talk a little bit about laughter in this one as well, Garth. So,
Yeah,
so well done.
yeah. Hey, before we go, are you going anywhere special for March break? You probably are.
Yeah, we're going, the family are going down to Costa Rica. So, not to worry, listeners, we'll have episodes coming, but I will be in Costa Rica enjoying myself.
Excellent. All right. Speaking of enjoying, enjoy this episode, listeners. Have a good one.
All right, get in there.
Lassoing leadership, sharp and true. Beard's Book Club got wisdom for you. Turn the pages, let the stories flow. Unpacking lessons as we grow.
Welcome back to Lassoing Leadership. I'm Jason Rogers, one of your co-hosts, and I'm here with my friend, colleague, and co-conspirator, none other than Garth Nichols. Garth, it's good to see you today. How are you doing?
Jason, I'm really good. Always great to see you. I am on March break. You're about to go on March break. So there's a lot to be joyful about, my friend.
It is. It's a nice tie-in too, Garth. I mean, we just finished a really incredible conversation with the Chief Joy Officer himself, and what a conversation was. I think our listeners really enjoyed hearing about a book that is from a different time, but is as topical today as ever. Don't you think?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I uh I loved our conversation with Rich because we were able to get really deep into how joy can be planned, how joy can be planned for. And we did get a little bit into the definition of joy. So Jason, I thought I would start off by reminding our listeners the difference between joy and happiness. What do you think?
Yeah, I think oft confused, oft intermingled, um,
Yeah.
seldom understood. So, Garth, why don't you do that? Why don't you set the table for us? Set the record, if you will.
Yeah, so happiness, as it pertains to or in relationship to joy, happiness tends to be caused by external circumstances, events, or achievements, not unlike the Oscars, which were just last night.
Mhm. Correct.
Whereas joy is internal well-being, contentment, or spiritual connection, which Shohei Ohtani has to the game of baseball. Vlad Guerrero Jr. has to the game of baseball. And I think you need joy in that work, especially when the Dominican Republic was uh, they were knocked out of the game last night, knocked out of the World Baseball Classic last night by the U.S. on a call that should have been a ball by like 3 solid inches, but it wasn't. I'm really impressed with the reaction. They weren't angry, upset, inflammatory. They just accept it as part of the joy, as part of the game of baseball, right? But they do have this sort of spiritual connection. Happiness is fleeting and temporary, whereas joy is deeper, more enduring, and consistent. It gets you through those hard times, I would argue, too. Happiness tends to be triggered by a specific event or stimulus, like winning money, a good meal, all those different things. Whereas joy is an internal state of being. It can be felt even during difficult times, which you just talked about. And the nature of happiness is an emotion, whereas joy is a state of being. And I think that's profound. So there you
Garth, you
go.
know what you just reminded me of is a really good book from about 15 years ago called Born to Run. Did you ever read that book?
Yeah, I did.
About
I
the,
did.
I'm going to maybe mispronounce it, but it's a Tarahumara tribe in Mexico. It's actually where you're recording from right now. And their joy in running, that was really the thesis of that book, was like
Mm.
running was joy for them. And that actually accounted for a lot of their performance and their lifestyle. I thought that was a really interesting part of that book. So thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, because I think it was like it's largely connected to culture and therefore purpose and a state of well-being and belonging to.
Oh, and I think, like for our listeners, we've been talking back and forth offline about culture and school culture, organizational culture, and how do you continue to sustain that. Now, what I love about Rich's conversation was when he talked about hiring and how
Yeah.
they hire. So, Garth, for those who may not have listened to the last episode, and I hope everybody does, give 30 seconds on how Rich and his team hire for their organization.
Rich explained that at Menlo Park you work in pairs. And
Yeah.
so when you are interviewing, you interview in pairs. And there's only one task that's put towards the applicants, and that is if Jason and if you and I were a pair, I would have to work with you in order for you to get the next interview.
Yeah.
And then after 20 minutes, it switches. There's a lot of observation, a lot of reflection in those moments, but in the end, the message is clear that this is about collaboration, not competition. And so in that way, the hiring process directly onboards people into this culture of joy and working together. And I think the biggest, as Rich was saying, the biggest metric is, would I want to work with Garth? Would I want to work with Jason? And that is
Mm-hmm.
the metric that they use. And it got me thinking about, the hiring process in schools. And Rich sort of
Right.
off the cuff was like, yeah, generally traditional interviews, we lie to each other for an hour, you know? So how do we disrupt that? I think is really interesting because he said he has a poster or something on his wall, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but the systems and structures are designed to elicit the behaviors that you're experiencing. And it starts right with hiring. And I think that's
Yeah.
a profound way of structuring a company through systems and structures that build towards joy, as he was explaining. What did you make of that, Jason? How achievable would that be in your organization?
Well, I don't think it's unachievable, but it does give a moment of pause for us, right? So I think
Hmm.
sitting back and thinking about our interview processes, what are we actually interviewing for? Is it
Yeah.
ability to, as Rich would say, like lie to one another for an hour? Or are we looking at the more important competencies that we're looking for in education. So when I think about that in our schools, like obviously the ability to connect and personalize, the ability to be warm, to empathize, to get an understanding of the user in a short period of time. And so I don't think a traditional interview does that very well, to be honest. It seems to me that, if we have a series of rote questions and we answer those rote questions, that is an interview to better understand how well you interview or answer rote questions. So the question would be, how do we adjust our interviews to make them a little bit more, in situ, or a little bit more in context of what we're looking for? And I don't know about you, Garth, but have you ever done anything in an interview that would support that notion, or at least even piloted it as you've gone ahead?
It's interesting because thank you for that, Jason. The next question I was going to ask you was if you had a piece of advice, because it's March, independent schools. This is the hiring season, so to speak. What would be your piece of advice? And to anyone going into an interview, mine is always, what you want to do is leave the interview knowing that you have shown them who you are authentically, not lying about it, or being hyperbolic about your abilities, so that if they do come back and say congratulations, you're like, great, they hired me for me.
Right.
And if not, great, it wasn't me, it was somebody else, and you can walk away happy with more content with that. And so my experience in interviews is less about the questions they ask and more about the questions I wanted to answer, if that makes sense. And so taking opportunities to really show them who I am, telling stories. I mean, Rich even talked about his colleagues giving him the moniker of Chief Joy Officer. You want to be able to tell stories that really reflect who you are. And that is my advice. But Jason, what would be your advice to anyone going into an interview?
Well, I think there's two sides to this. Like, let's stick on the advice to the interviewee, and then let's talk about advice for the interviewer as well. I think coming back to that. But I think if I'm giving advice to an interviewee, I think, yeah, absolutely, Garth. I think being authentic is the first thing. Second is get to know the organization or the position you're interviewing for, and know that you can own that mission, vision, values, and that job description. I think that's really important from an interviewer's lens, but also from a life balance and happiness or joyfulness lens as well, because this is the lot you're going to have to live. So you've got to get really comfortable with, the roles of responsibilities of the head of school, for instance, or a development officer, or whatever you're applying for. I think those are really important. And the third one, to your point as well, is like absolutely curate those stories or those mantras that define you and your practice. And I think those are ageless, timeless, and transcend any kind of interview theme, if you will, because that's what people are looking for. They're looking for people who have the lived experience and are able to deliver on the job expectations. So I think, from a starting point, that's how you prepare for a job interview.
Yeah, for sure. When I was my most recent interview obviously was with Kingsway College School, and I always had a couple of anchors, so that if I was thrown a curveball, I could go back and say, well, this is what anchors me. And that gives you a moment to your brain to process the question that's being asked, right? And then if those anchors, and they should be, are authentic and true to who you are, then you have a really great answer regardless of, the question, how unprepared you were for the question. You can actually go back to those anchors and really give an authentic response to it.
And I think, you can't undervalue the importance of rehearsal too, right, Garth? You don't want to go into an interview and be asked a question and answer it for the first time in that interview with a bunch of strangers who are judging you. And so I think, the opportunity to rehearse amongst, safe friends and colleagues, even if they're not people who do hiring for schools, just the opportunity to talk through it out loud is so valuable.
Yeah. I got to give a shout out to Tracy Fosher, because she was like, you and I will rehearse your presentation. I'm like, oh no, that's okay. I don't want to put you out. She's like, you and I will rehearse your presentation, and all I'm going to do is listen. I'm not going to give you any feedback. All I'm going to do is listen. And I just really appreciated that little push, that little nudge as well. But
Mhm.
Jason, do you do anything special in your interviews as an
Well, there's
interviewer?
yeah, I think, there's lots of ways to work this, but I think, three of the things that I enjoy the most in interviews, one is I do compel our panels to listen for joy. Like we actually
Mm,
look for those natural places of laughter, because we do hope that that will be part of the culture around here, is that we have a place where we can laugh with one another, and we think an interview is a great place to start. That doesn't mean we need to be stand-up comedians, or we don't need to be cracking jokes, but we do look for those moments of levity in the interview, and it's actually important, something that we watch for. Second one is any authentic way to introduce a candidate to students in a safe way is important. Just to watch how's the first interaction, how do they have comfort in the space, are they connecting, are they curious, all the things that we really value. And you can push that a step further, where you can integrate students safely into an interview process just by simply having them give a tour and ask them afterwards, like, how was the
yep.
tour? I'm not saying this is part of the interview process, but what did you how did you feel? And kids will tell you pretty quick, like, that was a
Yep.
lot of fun. Or, they didn't seem that interested in art, but they sure loved the gym space. Like
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
things come back really quickly. And then my favorite of all time, Garth, was a time when we were thinking about how do teachers teach, and we want to figure that out really quickly. So we sent teachers the prompt to the candidate saying, teach us something in the interview that we don't already know, and you have a 10-minute block to do that. And
Mm,
so, one, it showed us something they're really passionate in, because they were going to teach us about origami, or they're going to teach us about ancient mysticism or something along those lines. It also showed us a little bit how they thought about teaching a new concept to people who have no context what that concept is. Is
yeah.
there a motivational set? Is there a hook? Is there any formative feedback? Is there a closer? Those things we were looking for to be embedded in their practice. And so we really did see a lot of true colors come out of that process as well.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I always try and incorporate a case study of some sort sent
Mm-hmm.
in advance. I think that's really nice too that you send it in advance.
Mm-hmm.
But Jason, this takes a lot of work,
Mm-hmm.
and that because it is almost like an early onboarding into the organization. And you asked a great question. I want to touch back on it of Rich. You said, "What's the return on investment of joy? What's the return on investment of doing this?" And did you like his answer?
Yeah, actually, I really did enjoy and appreciate his answer. And I think, like, in the most simple way is like, what's the cost? You could simply ask, like, what's the cost of not having an optimal culture?
Mm,
And that cost is absolutely huge, right? You could see how that would have a terrible impact on any organization, whether it's in business, in medicine, in education, or otherwise. So I think the return on investment is pretty plainly obvious. You, like he said, would you rather take the people who are happy to and excited to work on a project, or the people who are not
yeah.
happy and excited to work on a project? You're like, okay, well,
Yeah.
certainly we're going to take the people who are happy, excited, and motivated to work on a project. And I think, if we believe that joy is one of those fundamental emotions, like one of the emotions that, drives us to perform, drives us to, work harder and do better work, then absolutely it's just so clear that the return on investment is obvious, and the cost for not investing could be near catastrophic, right? So
Yeah.
I completely ascribe to what he was saying about that. How about you? How do you see return on investment? And did you agree with Rich's
Well, I
provocation there?
I did agree with it, and what it got me thinking about was particularly that example. If you've got half your company working with joy and the other half, they're experts and they'll do it well. I do think that the outcomes are different, and I think that's what distinguishes Menlo from other organizations, because he talked about wanting to delight the users, wanting to
Yes,
delight
delight.
his clients, which is different than just getting the job done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about that a lot in terms of schools, because you can have experience moments of happiness throughout your time in education. but at the end of, whatever it is, the 14 years K-12 or the 4 years of high school, are you leaving a school that has had a profound impact on you? And you mentioned this term earlier. You were like, laughing, you know, and laughing is a wonderful thing, scientifically, biologically, psychologically, right? It allows you to take yourself less seriously. It allows you to take others, you know, or difficult moments a little less seriously as well, and do things with joy, that even though they're difficult. And so I loved his answer in the sense that it reminded me that getting the job done has different outcomes when you do it with joy or you do it with just through expertise and going through the motions.
No, I think that's totally true. And I think, generally speaking, people who do carry joy as a core emotion are probably just, I don't know, just a little bit easier to get along with. And I think when we get along with people, we're willing to spend a lot more time with them. And when we spend more time with people, I think nothing but good things come from that. So it seems like a pretty reinforcing cycle in all of that. I think Rich is on something.
I think so too. And another thing he's on to as well is allowing others into his work,
right?
Seeing what it's like. And he talks a lot about these organizational tours that really just reinforce the purposes or the joyful, the emphasis of joy at Menlo. And there's some great moments in the book that he talks about where he finds he is telling stories as he gives these tours, and then other people are taking up those stories and he's hearing them in other contexts, and other people telling the stories in the same way. And he said, don't let facts get in the way of a good story, right. Which I love, right? Because stories they're cultural artifacts too. So do you give tours at Rundle?
Yeah,
just for interest's sake?
Yeah, we do all the time, Garth. And I think, oftentimes we have to balance off what's a organizational load on that, because we have a lot of people interested in coming, spending time, sometimes want to spend up to a week here getting to know what's going on in the program and how we address particularly the side of the program with learning disabilities, but the college and the studio certainly draw a lot of attention too. So it's balancing what we want to do to bring people in, balancing the value to the organization, and balancing what we can give back to other people as well. I'm a huge believer, and so we try to facilitate as much of this as we can. There's probably a space to, create an actual system around it, which would make it a little bit more efficient. And largely, I've only learned what I know today by visiting other schools, and I've had the benefit of having so many good friends, whether it's in Boston, New York, or Los Angeles, San Francisco, or everywhere in between, all the way across Canada, visiting schools. And I think about it like this: is like, we could spend a bunch of money on conference fees all of the time and learn a little bit, or you can go to a school and get a great tour and learn a lot for almost nothing. And so we've leveraged that, and we always find that if you send like 2 or 3 people, sometimes 4 or 5, the outcome seems to be a little bit more exponential, because they build off of each other's learnings. They see different things. They have different generative conversations. And so whether it's us giving these types of tours or us taking these kinds of tours, it's been a core part of our thinking for a long time here at Rundle. And I can see where this would work Menlo, and it does help establish, enshrine, and further develop your culture when you have to talk about it to strangers.
Yeah, Jason, this is my formal invitation for you and I to go visit Menlo.
We should go do that. That'd be tons of fun, hey?
Yeah, I think it'd be great.
Okay. Well, come out to Toronto, and then we'll just head straight down there, and probably not far from where you're at.
It's Ann Arbor, Michigan. Yeah, it was a great podcast. Gave me a lot to think about, particularly, this time of year as we're heading into the last sort of term, if you will, the last couple of months, April, May, June, which really fly by. And to all my colleagues who listen to this, but anyone who's in education in particular, I hope that you can put joy at the forefront in these next couple of months. You coming back from March break. Hopefully you've rejuvenated a little bit. You've primed the engine, and these are important months. Lots of final assessments, lots of report card writing, lots of interactions with parents at special events, and all those things. So hopefully, if you haven't listened to the podcast, you do. If you haven't read the book, please do, and try and put joy at the forefront of these next couple of months.
And you know what gives me a ton of joy, Garth, is thinking about the guests we have coming up on this show, because this Little Beards book club has taken on a life of its own, and we've got a few more doozies kind of in the hopper. Do you want to pick off one or two that you're excited about? We can announce here, then I might do the same.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's funny you mentioned this. First of all, I want to go back to our very first guest on Beards Book Club, Kurt Gray, because his book keeps coming up for me. And so, that's where we started, and this is how it's going now. Claude Silver's on her way. Jennifer Wallace is on her way. Who else? Ashish Advani on his way. He's been on the podcast before, season 1 or 2, I think. So we've got a lot of really great, good ones. But the next in our series is Drew Dudley, and we're going to be looking at his book called Day One, and it is a great read. He's a great guy. He's done a lot of TED Talks. He's known for the lollipop moment. If the name sounds familiar to those of you in education, he was speaking at a lot of schools. He's done a lot of great work in education. If it's unfamiliar, just Google the lollipop moment. You don't even have to write his name down. It comes up. He's made it quite infamous. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that conversation.
Absolute classic. And I can't wait to share that with our listeners. And like we said, we've got many, many more to come. Thanks to all the authors who've joined us and all the authors who are about to join us. It's been a ton of fun, Garth. I hope it brings you as much joy as it brings me.
Oh, thanks, buddy. It always does. And you do as well. All right, listeners, until next time, keep reading and leading the Lasso way.
All right. Thanks a lot, Garth.
Thanks, everybody.
Grab your coffee, grab your seat. It's time to learn, it's time to meet. Garth and Jason setting the tone. Leadership lessons to take back home. Lassoing leadership, sharp and true. Beards Book Club got wisdom for you. Turn the pages, let the stories flow. Unpacking lessons as we grow. Keep leading the lasso way. Together we'll grow stronger every day. So plug in your headphones and let's start the show. With lessons from Ted, we'll learn and grow. Lassoing leadership, sharp and true. Beards Book Club got wisdom for you. Turn the pages, let the stories flow. Unpacking lessons as we grow. Keep leading the lasso way. Together we'll grow stronger every day. So plug in your headphones.